Well, hello and welcome to the first end of season special from this FM22 One Club story from Hemel Hempstead Town with me, Daniel. It's the Tudor Times and it's part 9 today. And as we promised at the start of this save, what we're going to do at the end of each season throughout our One Club journey is we're going to try and show you the behind the scenes elements of this football club. Now that's down to a couple of reasons. The first one is I didn't want to try and get my use of the new features into all of the main episodes because I think you'd get a bit bored if I was showing you what I was doing with the data hub in the staff meetings, etc. as part of the normal episodes. I still wanted that to feel like a story. But also, it does play a big role in how we manage the club, particularly in a one club story like this where we're in charge of everything from transfers to coaching to whatever else. So I do want to make sure that I show you the behind the scenes elements of this club, how I run it and what elements of FM I use to make it as realistic as possible. So if you're looking forward to seeing that, the first of many hopefully if we keep our job, please do put a thumbs up on the video, subscribe down below and turn that notification bell on for daily FM22 content from 2 long-term stories. If you've missed any of this series or the head coach, you can catch up with them in the eye above. There's also a link to our Twitch channel up there, where we should have been live with Derby County earlier today, and the same will apply tomorrow as well. It's been an exciting couple of days. Of course, yesterday's Hemel episode was a brilliant season finale. We had a transfer special in the head coach, courtesy of a director of football. And tomorrow morning, I've got something very special coming. I'm going to give myself an extra day to get through the transfer window with Hemel Hempstead, and a transfer special for this one will be on Monday. But tomorrow morning in its place, I've got a data hub special. Not just how to use it, what it's like, but when to use it, which is something that's come up a lot in comments I've seen on my videos and others, and as well as from friends off camera too. Hopefully it will answer the statements from some people about it not working or them making the changes and nothing happening. So I'm hopeful that will address that. But in the meantime, we've got to have a look at Hemel Hempstead and how season 1 has happened. Because of course, there was one notable event which changed the season. We also talked a lot in the early episodes about the importance of team cohesion. And those two things together have made this a very successful year, despite a really poor start. So the aim of this episode really is to make you feel like you're part of that staffing meeting that we have on the last day before we go on holiday in the summer, how we're going to plan next season, what has been good, what has been bad about this year, and reflect on that as well. But let's start with the messages about the end of the season. Of course, we finished the last episode with our season review. It certainly was a memorable one. We've also got our analyst report, which is something that's going to feature in today's episode. We've got our club vision and expectations, which thankfully are just a fight against relegation next year. So we're going to accept that. We're going to look at the squad dynamics, because that for me has been one of the most crucial elements of the season. And we're going to do the end of season team meeting, because as well as showing you the sort of staff inside at the end of the season if I was there, we've got to do the player bits as well. So we want to tell these lads that we want to work as hard as possible to avoid relegation, but we also want to get some new faces. So that's what we're going to say. We're going to say that's what we wanted to hear. We're going to make promises when we come back. They're all happy with that. So we've got a nice dressing room now. And we'll reflect on which ones are still going to be here in July. We've been really lucky with injuries. It's probably the least I've ever seen in an FM save is this season with Hemel Hempstead. James Dobson's picked up a few knocks in game, but they've never really translated to injuries. So I'm not sure if that's just luck and will balance out next year, or if we're lucky to have very few injury-prone players. The squad will be back on the 20th of June. Hemel Hempstead win the FA Trophy final. And no awards for our players. That is really unfair. But we are shortlisted for the manager award. We're going to offer it to the Braintree manager, who's done brilliantly to get them up. But let's crack on with our end to the season, because I want to show you the areas that have been most important to me this year. And for the most part, it hasn't been the data hub. There's a couple of elements I want to show you, but the reason it hasn't been used a huge amount, particularly in the second half of the season this year, will be explained in tomorrow's video, so I'm not going to worry about that too much. I don't really use the overview screen a huge amount when I'm searching for problems. That's normally just my little monthly look to make sure things are ticking over. However, the team performance is something I used early in the season when we were struggling to put chances away, we were playing lovely football, we were dominating matches, but we weren't actually taking advantage of those opportunities. So the expected goals table is one of many I have here, and our expected goals and our expected points is the best. You can see from the start of the season where our expected goals was way superior to the goals we were actually scoring. It's almost levelled itself out now, which is fantastic. and the expected goal against is almost spot on. We've got a watertight defence. I mean, compared to everyone else in the league, we are phenomenal back there. Generally, I try to have the comparisons with all of the league on. There's two reasons for this. The first one is it's for us to identify issues in our game. If there are things that aren't quite standing out, if there are things we would expect to see looking better but aren't. So you might see here, for an example, there's a concern that we're making fewer tackles and they're not great. So yes, there's perhaps a concern we're not winning so many tackles, but you could argue the fact that we're pressing high up the pitch, we're trying to make big interceptions, maybe that's why we're losing a few more. You could argue the fact that we're playing a more high defensive line means that we're going to miss the odd tackle because we're forcing teams to just play over the top. You never know, but not an area of concern at the moment. The rest of it though, you can see we're in a pretty good position in the league, and it's a way to see if our little tactical tweaks work. So for example, in about October, we were having loads of possession, we were all the way up here, but we weren't creating much in terms of crosses. Our shooting was okay, and we weren't great in terms of movement. So we took off the play out of defence and just gave the lads a little bit more freedom to play forward. We then a month later took off the work ball into the box, just allowed them to take more opportunities from distance. And we've gradually seen that although the passing's come down slightly in comparison, the possession certainly has, we're now able to get more crosses in, better movement and better finishing stats. And all of those things add up and show you if your little tactical tweaks are working out. And of course, if for example you change a wing back from defend to support, you want to get them forward, you're asking them to cross more often, you want to see not only are they putting in lots of crosses, but are they accurate or not? And that tells you where your problem is. Is it the man heading the ball or is it the man trying to get the cross in? So that's where we use the data hub for now. But this season, particularly once we got on the roll around the halfway mark, it's not been such an important factor for us. So we'll leave the focus on that for a future season. The main things that have been important to us this season are team cohesion. It is so essential this year, more than ever in my opinion, that team cohesion and tactical familiarity are high. You can see for us, they're both pretty perfect at the moment. We've tried to get players in roles that suit them down to the ground. We've tried to get the team into a consistent pattern where players know exactly what's expected of them. And we've tried to match that up as well with individual training for certain players to make sure they're working on specific duties or specific attributes that are going to be paramount to their role moving forward. It's something the data hub's really helped with inadvertently, which is preventing you from making wholesale tactical changes all the time, because that's always going to lead to dips. If particularly when you're training semi-pro only a couple of days a week, you're asking for really complicated instructions and they're very different ones each time around. So that's why we've actually probably more than ever on camera stripped back our tactics, certainly on the ball and certainly in transition. And the only thing we've really gotten off the ball is to try and play a slightly higher line, which thankfully with a quite quick defence we've been able to do. And having a sweeper keeper, of course, makes a big difference to that. In terms of team cohesion though, the only way to get it to improve is to have a similar team playing each week, which we've done even when we've brought loan players in this year, is to also make sure you've got a tactic that isn't changing too often. It's one of the biggest things that stops cohesion. And you can actually see even when we've signed loan players who are better than the first teamers, we've tried to keep the originals in more often than not, particularly at the start, just to try and keep that familiarity, just to make sure that we're building something at the club. The atmosphere is pretty good. It would be at this time. Just one player unhappy, but it's only a Lone Star, and the managerial support is up to excellent, but you would expect that after the season we've had. The other thing I've found really important this year, and something I've always tried to do since they've come in, is look after our mentoring groups in a really careful way. Now, when you're in the lower leagues, like we are here, I guess like we are in a head coach as well, you don't often have many leaders to have 3 or 4 great mentoring groups. But here, we've got a fairly professional skipper who's a team leader. It's a perfect balance for us. So when we've got younger players, yes, to an extent, I'm looking like I always used to at players who have got a balanced or worse personality and try and edge their professionalism up working under Mantum. But also, I'm looking now at the social groups probably more. Because we've got a few people who at the start of the season didn't fit into that core social group. You can see now it's only loanies that have joined in the second half of the year. Because where we had 2 social groups at the start of the season, I very deliberately tried to pick the players with the balanced personality out of the second group and put them with Sam Mantum in the mentoring group who was top of the core social group. Because if you can get 2 or 3 of the 5 players in that secondary group to be friends with Sam Mantum, who's the leader of the core group, you can suddenly introduce them all and have one big group like this, which is basically a massive dream if you're managing a football club. You don't want to have little cliques of 2 or 3 or 4 players. You're of course going to have new signings that drop back a bit here. But over the course of the season, this is another important element of really integrating your squad. And we're going to have to work on that again next year because a lot of these players aren't good enough, haven't played a lot this season. And at the moment, I think there's only actually 12 players who are still going to be on the books here next season. So this process that we've gone through extensively this year is going to have to happen again. So I know this sort of episode isn't for everyone, but these are the sort of things that I never see mentioned in other videos. And that's why I wanted to make a season review where I talk about the things that I feel are so important in building that form over a season. And yes, it means traditionally in this save, we're probably going to be quite slow starters. But I want to make the opposite thing happen of last year. Last year, we started seasons well and faded towards the end. So I've put a real emphasis on building something special ready for the second half of the year. And so far, it seems to have worked. That is my favourite element of what we've achieved so far. The only other thing I briefly want to mention, we're not going to talk about them in great detail, is the introduction of staff meetings in this year's game. I know a few of you have said even in streams and that you don't like them. I think it is such an important part of the game. For me, I like it because it makes me feel like part of a coaching team for the first time ever, rather than just going solo and having some people to delegate things to. It feels like they're part of your team. It feels like you're managing a club with some coaches. However, one of the things I like about it, and we'll see what examples we get here, is that for the head coach, something I've asked for years, recommending players to be transfer and loan listed happens. It gets done without us having to worry about it. It gives us recommendations on contract based on players' attributes, based on their financial demands. It gives us a real overview of the club. I love that it also gives us reminders on things that we may have otherwise forget, to keep an eye on the mentoring groups, something I always forget to do. I'm great at setting them up, but that's why the core social group is so strong this year, because I'm getting the reminders here, maybe once a month, once every 6 weeks, to go and check it, because something's made a change. And that has had a huge impact on how well I manage the players rather than just managing the tactic and the on the pitch stuff. We keep an eye on our youth players that I will have a look at today. We had a really terrible youth intake, which is why it didn't feature, but I will show you the best couple just as part of this review. And then we also get told about staffing that need to be pushed on, that need to improve, ones that might be suitable for coaching badges. I just think overall, it's all the little things that I'd forget. If I didn't have that staff meeting, I'd go 10 years without sending anyone on a coaching course. But the fact that it's been picked out that this person might be suitable, and it doesn't happen overly often and it makes it unrealistic, I think that's a really encouraging sign. So probably my favourite of the big feature introductions this year. On a quick team note before we go and look at our season plans, Elliot Hodgkit-Young, he has now retired to take on the under-18 manager role as a full-time job. So that's 150 quid off the wage bill without really doing anything, which is great. Only 25 years of age, but I don't think he actually made an appearance for us in the end. In terms of the youth intakes, we're probably not going to have anything to worry about for 2 or 3 years because we're not going to get good players through. Let's be honest, we've got basically no facilities, basically no coaching or recruitment staff. We're not going to be having great players here. Francis Ilunga is the best of the ones that has come through. A decent finisher, but physically miles off. So I don't know really where he fits. Certainly now we've gone up to the National League, he'll probably never make it. But nice to have a few of them signed on anyway. We've also managed to add to the team Will Lloyd. He is 1-star ability, 3-star potential. A wing-back, which again doesn't really suit the tactic, but might make it as a non-league footballer again. So not all doom and gloom. And the one with the biggest potential, Wayne Berry, is a striker who can't finish or head the ball. No composure, not my type of player. But with all of that done behind the scenes, of course, let me know if there's other elements of it you'd like to see. There will be years where we focus on other things. If we get more injuries, the medical centre. If we need to do more work on adapting roles because we can't find our targets, the training. And of course, probably the data hub later down the line too. But for now, let's finish off by looking at our squad plans, what we've got at the moment for next season, and what we're planning to do in the transfer market. So let's start this by highlighting all of the players that are on the books for next season, which includes the 2 players who are on non-contract terms, potentially some trialists that will be coming in. We mentioned them in the last episode. And of course, the players that are already signed on for next season. So in terms of Dejon Noel-Williams, who's wanted anyway, and Zeli Ismail, they're emergency backups. They're people we keep until we get a squad we're happy with, unless of course they get poached by another club. But for now, they're not really part of our plans. They're there if we need a player on the bench for that first month or two of the season. And that's why we signed Ishmael for the last month or two. So we can't expect anything different from them. And we can't expect them to be committed to us when we're not really overcommitting to them. So if they get another club and they move, I completely accept and respect that. Of course, the big news for the summer is that Joe Redmond is leaving on a free for Sligo Rovers. He rejected a new deal with us and he's going to earn 950 quid a week in Ireland. So I don't blame him at all. But it is a massive void to fill in the squad. We've had the best defence in the league, but we will only have one centre-half on the books in the summer. Cole Kopekwa thankfully signed a new deal, and that's why we broke our wage budget structure a little, because I didn't want to be without both of them, and I didn't want to have no centre-halves just in case we couldn't sign one. So Joe Redmond is going to be the number one target to replace. Stephen Gleeson, if he'll accept less than 300 quid a week, I'll keep him at the club, because he's highly influential, he's got a good character, and aside from his physical stats, which are dramatically declining, he's not actually that bad across the board. So a player I'd like to keep is one less one I've got to sign. But to be honest, I don't know that he's going to accept that. He's still at the minute wants about the same as he's on, and that I just can't afford to give. But the 11 we've got is pretty balanced aside from that. Of course, Chris Paul is a bit of a utility man. He's not going to be starting next year if all goes well in the window. But the other 10 is basically our first 11 minus Redmond. And that is the continuity I want. I don't really care if we don't get any big senior upgrades. As I'm doing with the try lists, and the reason that I focused my scouts so heavily on youth players from the Premier League and Championship, is I want to have a position where we can bring in a good young squad of backup players that can then push for the first team. And if one or two of them improve throughout the season, they can then work their way in. I don't want to get in players who are 28, 29, 30 years of age, experienced National League or National League North and South players who want to then come in and play football, because that's going to disrupt the harmony of the team for what has been a brilliant side that deserves a go at the National League. And don't forget, we're going up with the momentum of being unbeaten in 30 odd games. If we then go and break that by signing too many players, it doesn't bode well for the season. So I'm going to trust these boys to keep the momentum of the first month. I want to sign some young players. We've got to improve the squad overall. We've got to make it bigger. We've got to make it stronger. Maybe we can extend one or two of the loans. Maybe we can rely on local clubs again to help us get 3 or 4 younger players in on loan. But the truth of the matter is, I would expect a lot of this 11 to be the same. I said it in the last episode after the heroics. David Gregory will start the season even if there's a keeper 3 times better than him here. Because he is the legend of this club. He joined in October with us losing half of our games. We're invincible with him. But of course, the one thing we have to have for the start of next season is a centre-half and a bench we can fill. So that's going to be the task we've got for next season. I'm really looking forward to a summer special with Hemel Hempstead. One day off tomorrow to have our Data Hub episode. And then on Monday, we will be back for the National League. Transfers galore, and maybe our first game, depending on how many players come in. But if we set a record for trialists at the start of this season, I can't wait to see how many it will be next year. As long as we can replace these players going out for the same or slightly less on the wage bill, I think we've got to be pleased with the progress we're making. I'm loving life at Hemel Hempstead Town. It's been an unbelievable first season, exceeding all expectations and getting trophies in the locker. And hopefully that will give us a little bit to work with next year, where the operation is to make sure we stay up. If you want to find out if we can do that and you did enjoy this first end of season review, please do put a thumbs up on the video. Let me know in the comments if you do any of the things I've shown you in the background. Are there any areas you focus on that I haven't? Or are there any of the areas that I focus on there that you haven't looked at in detail before? Because some of them I feel are really important to our success. Of course, also let me know if there's any future things you'd like to see in end of season reviews, any areas of the club you'd like me to look at. There's a few that we will as they become appropriate in later years, but for now I just wanted to show you the element I think has been most important this year, and that is certainly team cohesion, tactical familiarity, and more importantly just keeping it simple and getting one group of players that are gelled together and happy as a squad. Please do subscribe down below if you haven't already and turn that notification bell on. We'll be back with the head coach at 3:30 today. As I mentioned, we've got something special coming tomorrow morning relating to the Data Hub. And then we will be back on Monday morning with this one, 11:30 AM, for a transfer special ahead of our National League season. A massive thank you for watching and your support with this brilliant first year at Hemel Hempstead. I've really enjoyed it. And I'll see you next time as we celebrate our promotion with a big transfer special. I'll see you there.